Hi, I'm Artis Wodehouse, and thanks for tuning in. The concept behind today's video, a version of which was delivered at the Global Piano Roll meeting held at Stanford University on August 10th, 2026, grew from a previous presentation I made on Zoom for the same group in December 2025. Entitled Gershwin Unknown, I documented which of Gershwin's 141 piano roll performances were currently available to the general public as sound recordings, tabulated about 57, and open discussion for exploring dissemination of the remaining 84. In the 2025 Zoom presentation, I mentioned the late David Quinlan's pioneering 1989 scans of 117 original Gershwin paper piano rolls that I now own in the form of MIDI data in my computer. The 117 original Gershwin rolls then belonged to the late collector Michael Montgomery. Montgomery loaned them to be scanned in order that I might study Gershwin's extensive work as a piano roll artist dating from 1916 to the mid-1920s. Through Mike's generosity and David Quinlan's scanning capability, I was able to avoid the problematic and impractical use of fragile and, in some cases, valuable original paper piano rolls. However, Quinlan's scans captured neither the lyrics to the song rolls, the words, nor the expression lines inscribed on Gershwin's originals. The words were here, the expression line was roughly here. The expression line was either a wavy or dotted line that showed who was operating the player piano how to add loud and soft to create a more human performance rather than straight, flat, unmediated dynamics. Around 2012, Michael Montgomery's Gershwin collection was sold piecemeal, broken up. Thus, the possibility of studying Gershwin overall roll production in its original paper format became problematic. Dispersal of complete or near complete collections, such as Mike Montgomery's, points to the large issue of preservation. When well-curated collections of rolls, such as Mike Montgomery's, became dispersed, it often prevents the general public from hearing music that would be actually of clear interest, or scholars from a full study of music in the roll meeting produced by important artists. The majority of Gershwin's rolls were 88-note rolls requiring the interpretive input of the pianist, the person pumping the roll. In other words, they could add dynamics or modify the tempo. Most of Gershwin's rolls are word rolls. That is to say, arrangements of popular tunes of the day, and most of Gershwin's rolls are not tunes by him, but by other people. Words to the songs were on the right, as I said, so they could be read as the music was unfurling over the tracker bar, and you'll see this. The 88-note rolls were created for the common 88-note player piano, a non-electrified player piano. The person pumping can see the roll words to the song, as I said before, and while they were pumping, and people nearby could also see these words and sing along with the roll music as it unfurled in front of their eyes and in front of the tracker bar. While Quinlan's 1989 MIDI formatted files that I have were useful, a more comprehensive study of Gershwin's piano roll music requires a return to either an original roll or the creation of an accurate, fully detailed paper replica, one that copies the note on, note off data, the placement of the roll's lyrics to the far right, in the case of the song rolls, and the expression line. The expression line present on all of Gershwin's originals, both song rolls and instrumentals, was either a wavy line or a dotted line. After my December 2025 presentation became available on the internet, it came to the attention of Bill Luecht. Mr. Luecht contacted me and told me he could reverse engineer Quinlan's 1989 MIDI scans back to paper piano rolls. That was a great development. However, as mentioned before, Quinlan's 1989 scans never captured either the lyrics or the expression lines seen on the originals. To fully recreate it, you'd need these. Furthermore, and to date, using an original player piano operated by a live pianolist, is the only way the expression lines can be executed in the way Gershwin might have heard them rendered. We haven't gotten there in computer technology yet. Bill was able to include the original lyrics in an authentic manner in his replica, which is wonderful, but has not had access to and therefore could not include expression lines. When lyrics and expression lines are added, reverse engineering Quinlan's 1989 data to paper replicas opens the door to full realizations of Gershwin's rolls in authentic playback from a period player piano. The benefits are these beyond being able to hear them. First, because Gershwin made such a large number of piano rolls during the heyday of the medium, the currently unexplored function of expression could begin to be reckoned with. I seem to be singing the same song over and over again here. Then two, the expression lines seen on Gershwin's 88 note rolls could be compared to the dynamics coded into the identical material issued in reproducing roll format, and scholars and specialists know what I'm talking about, another significant line of study. Second, for a broader historic perspective on the music and the way rolls works in the general culture of the time, full roll realizations can also be compared to the printed sheet music published and contemporaneous disc recordings made of the same tunes. Fascinating. Finally, by gathering together a more complete collection of Gershwin's rolls in full realization, we would be able to explore how the expression lines work in tandem with the music in the roll arrangement itself, and how the lyrics to the songs may have functioned and have emerged as a basis for expressive nuance. Before Bill begins his presentation, I will suggest, through 3 brief audio clips, a pathway for study and analysis of one early Gershwin song roll, Just a Word of Sympathy. This is a tune written by Kahn and Alstein, for which Gershwin in 1917, at age 19, cut a piano roll arrangement issued by the Aeolian Company on their Melody and Universal labels. The 3 clips begin with a vocal performance solo of Just a Word of Sympathy, recorded on flat acoustic disc for Columbia in September 1916. This will be followed by a vocal duo recorded similarly on a Victor recording released February 1917. Both of these selections are overlaid by the 1916 published sheet music, and you'll see it. After these, you will then hear a corresponding portion of my pianolized roll rendition of Bill Luecht's 1917, played by Gershwin, reverse engineered replica. Bill will then present a detailed technical summary describing his complex reverse engineering process that is ongoing. This video will then conclude with my full performance on my restored 1912 Bush & Lane 88-note player piano of Gershwin's 1917 piano roll arrangement of Just a Word of Sympathy. It will be rendered from Bill Luecht's replica, onto which Bill has printed the words properly and the expression line that I traced from Gershwin's original paper piano roll, now owned by Richard Smith of the Piano Exchange in Glen Cove, Long Island, New York.
For everything I gave, there's one thing that I crave. Just a little word of sympathy, just a little smile from you would turn the shadows into sunshine and make me cheery when life is dreary. For everything I gave, there's one thing that I crave. Just a little word of sympathy, just a little smile from you, would turn the shadows into sunshine and make me cheery when life is weary.
Hello everyone, I'm Bill Luecht. I'm here in my home in Danville, Indiana, and I made this video to try to tell you a little bit about our project to try to recreate accurate playable piano rolls from early roll scans. As Artis said in her introduction, she has scans of 117 rolls that were played by George Gershwin. These scans were made in 1989 or earlier by the late David Quinlan. The scans are in MIDI file format, and while they're playable on a Yamaha disc clavier, they have problems with playback and accuracy that make them unsuitable to use to make recut rolls. The title of this presentation might be a little bit misleading. We're not trying to recreate Quinlan's scanner, we're just trying to model how it works so that we can remove the systematic errors from the scan files. Today's roll scanning technology is so good that an exact copy of an original roll can be made quite easily, but the Quinlan scans were made with an earlier generation of scanning technology, and they don't have the necessary accuracy to work with punch matrix recovery programs. A couple of years ago, the late Spencer Chase announced that he had come up with a design for a relatively simple, low-cost laser piano roll perforator that a hobbyist could build, and a software program called MIDI to G-code, or M2G, to convert the MIDI files to G-code, the format that would drive the laser cutter. I got in touch with Spencer, eventually built one of the first successful perforators based on his design, and worked with him for a too short time on improvements to the laser perforator's design and the M2G software. One of the features of laser perforators is that the laser can be positioned within hundredths of a millimeter. In contrast, the paper advanced punch step on a mechanical perforator is in the 1 millimeter range. The laser cutter can cut perforations anywhere on the paper, so the notes in the input MIDI file don't need to be at even punch row intervals. Because of this, when I heard Artis talk about the Quinlan scans, I thought that maybe the flexibility of the laser cutter would allow me to make a playable roll from those scans. I reached out to Artis, told her what I was thinking, and she sent me a couple of the Quinlan MIDI files. I cut rolls from the files on the laser cutter, but the results were disappointing. When I played them on my player, the notes were uneven and the music just didn't have the crispness that's typical of player piano arrangements. So that started this investigation into the Quinlan scans. I couldn't find any information about Quinlan's scanner online. All we had were the MIDI files which were produced from the scans. So our approach was to compare a few Quinlan MIDI files to MIDI files made from new state-of-the-art scans for the same rolls, then attempt to identify how the Quinlan scans deviated from the new scans, and develop corrections which could be applied to all of the other Quinlan scans. Artis has original copies of several of the rolls that Quinlan scanned, so she sent two, If a Wish Could Make It So and Tiddledywinks, to Mike Swanson, and he provided scans as CIS files to us. Thanks to the accuracy of Swanson's scans, it was easy to make Punchmaster MIDI files using Warren Trachtman's software. Our work so far is based on the data from the two Swanson scans. My friend Jim Blanco of South Carolina has scanned over 30,000 rolls and was able to provide scans of 5 additional Gershwin rolls. I'm going to use these rolls to refine the process, but I haven't had time to do so yet. I used Anthony Robinson's MIDI2text.exe utility to convert the files to text format. The text data for a Swanson scan and the corresponding Quinlan scan were placed in an Excel spreadsheet, with a separate spreadsheet for the other song, and parsed and sorted. MIDI files have separate events for note on and note off, so they were sorted first to separate all note on events from note off events, then by note number, then by time. Then the Swanson and Quinlan numbers were positioned side by side so that the differences in timing of the events for the two scans could be studied. The spreadsheet for If a Wish has almost 8,000 rows, so 4,000 note-ons and 4,000 note-offs. So it's way too big to display here, but I did make several charts that I will show you. All the charts show data from the first roll, If a Wish. I did a similar study of the data for the other roll, and it produced similar results. The Quinlan scans show roll acceleration. When you play a Quinlan MIDI file, you can hear the music speed up towards the end. This chart shows the acceleration. The green dots are the individual note-on events. Horizontal axis is time, with the start of the roll on the left and the end of the roll on the right. The vertical position of the dots represents how far the timing of each Quinlan note deviates from the Swanson note. The units here are MIDI ticks, which is an arbitrary time unit specified in every MIDI file. In this case, there are about 712 ticks per second. Note that at the end of the roll, the Quinlan notes are about 10,000 ticks, or about 14 seconds, ahead of the Swanson notes. This acceleration tells us that the roll paper in the Quinlan scanner was wound around a take-up spool, rotating at a constant speed, but the buildup of paper on the spool gradually increased the diameter of the spool, which gradually increased the speed at which the paper was being pulled through the scanner. There is a mathematical formula that describes the acceleration caused by this situation. I won't go into it now, but even though we don't know the spool diameter or the exact thickness of the paper, we can get enough information to correct for the acceleration by comparing the timing of 3 points, start, middle, and end, in the Quinlan scan to the same points in the Swanson scan. In this chart, the green note-on dots represent the timing differences between Quinlan and Swanson after the correction for acceleration has been applied. The vertical scale in this chart is much more magnified than the previous one. The previous chart went up past 10,000, while this one only goes up to 140. The orange lines represent the timing of one punch row, or 24 ticks, above and below the black 0 line. Note that at the beginning, middle, and end, the band of green dots is about at the 0 line, but obviously there are still some differences caused by variation in the paper speed at other parts of the roll. The variation looks bad here, but the largest delay shown here is about 100 ticks, which is only about 1/7 of a second. In order to compensate for this, I scaled the approximate center of the green band at 500 tick intervals. This is plotted as the wavy magenta line that follows the green band. There is one significant thing I did not notice until I plotted the magenta line. There's a noticeable cyclic variation at about a 6,000 or 7,000 tick interval. This works out to about every 6 or 7 inches along the roll, or one wrap around the take-up spool. I suspect that this is from a lump caused by the roll leader tab and may be something that can be corrected for in the other Quinlan scans. Here is the chart for the timing differences for the note-off events. Note that the band of red off dots follows generally the same pattern as the on dots did in the previous slide, but they are shifted lower on the chart, which indicates a greater delay in their timings. This chart again shows the green note on dots, but now their timings have been corrected by values interpolated from the magenta line of the earlier chart. Now we're making some progress. Almost all of the dots are within one punch row of where they should be. The goal is to get most of them within 1/2 of a punch row. Now that the timings have been adjusted to eliminate most of the paper movement errors, we can do a note-by-note analysis to see if there are differences between individual notes of the scale. Here is the chart for the red note-off dots with their timings corrected using values interpolated from the same magenta line. Note two things here. There is about a 55 or 60 tick delay for the bulk of the dots, but there are a significant number of dots that are higher up in the near zero range. The 55 to 60 ticks delay tells us something about the Quinlan scanner, that the delay in the note-off timings is probably caused by the perforations in the paper passing over holes in a tracker bar. The scanner starts to detect the perforation when the leading edge of the perforation crosses the top of the tracker bar hole, and the detection does not stop until the trailing edge of the perforation crosses the bottom edge of the hole. Also, the lack of bridging in the Quinlan scans points to a tracker bar type setup where the sensing area is wider than the bridges in the paper. In the previous chart, the note-off dots that were up in the near zero range were puzzling to me until I found that they were all for short perforations in the roll, so I made this chart which plots the on and off timing differences against the durations of the notes. The green note-on dots are all fairly consistent, but the red note-off dots show a curious pattern. The red dots for the shortest perforations, on the left, show almost no delay, with the delay increasing up to the 55 to 60 tick range when the perforations reach about a 90 to 100 tick duration. This might be explained if the Quinlan scanner used a pneumatic system to trigger electrical contacts. If there were pouches or diaphragms that started inflating when the tracker port opened and triggered the contact before the pouch was fully inflated, then for a short perforation the pouch would start deflating almost immediately so the contact would break quickly, but for a longer note the pouch would inflate an additional amount after the contact was triggered and would have to deflate by that additional amount after the tracker port closed before the contact was broken. This chart shows the results of a note-by-note analysis. The horizontal axis is the MIDI note number, note 60 is middle C. Note 18 on the left is the sustain pedal. For each note on the tracker bar, the timing differences for every note on and every note off occurrence were averaged. Because of the effect noted in the previous slide, the note off averages do not include perforations shorter than 90 ticks. There was a high correlation in the results from the two rolls that were studied, so this chart is actually the combination of the values for the two rolls. The green dots and the green line are the timing differences for the note on values, red is for the note off. Note that the note on differences for the notes below middle C are all advanced by about 10 ticks from the notes above middle C. This is probably the result of the Quinlan system only being able to capture data for half of the roll at one time. Note that there are some notes that do not have any values shown, mostly at the extreme low and high ends of the scale. One of the songs, If a Wish, was in the key of E flat, the other one had a verse in the key of C and the chorus in E flat. So there were some notes that were only played a couple of times or not at all, while others appeared over 100 times. Hopefully the additional 5 scans will fill in the data. The average timing differences for each note, as shown on the previous chart, were saved to a table and applied as corrections to all the note on and note off events in the Quinlan scans. A weighted average was used for notes that had few or no occurrences. This chart shows the resulting corrected timing differences for the note on events. Most of the dots are now within the 1/2 punch row range, but there are still a handful of dots that are outside of the range. This chart shows the timing differences for the corrected note-off events. The values for perforations longer than 90 ticks were corrected by the full values, while corrections for shorter notes were prorated. The dots are now centered around the zero line, but there is a wider spread of values than for the note-on events. But from a playback standpoint, the timing of note-off events is not as critical as note-on events. In the Quinlan scans, there seems to be more irregularity in the timing of quickly repeated notes than in more widely separated notes. This chart shows note-on timing differences with the notes grouped by how closely they follow the previous occurrence of the same note. The notes that follow the preceding note by less than about 80 ticks appear to be advanced more than the others. This is probably another effect of the pouch inflating issue discussed earlier. I need to investigate this further and see if a correction can be made for this effect. I wrote a program which takes a Quinlan MIDI file, corrects for roll acceleration, and then applies the note-by-note corrections that we discussed to all of the note-on and note-off events. This slide is a piano roll view. It shows the G-code file generated by Spencer's M2G program of the first part of an original Quinlan MIDI in red, overlaid by the G-code of the Swanson MIDI in blue. Notice how the red perforations extend longer than the blue perforations, the shorter notes less so than the longer ones, but also how the beginnings or bottom edges of some of the notes are not aligned. And here is the Quinlan file with all of the corrections applied in red, overlaid by the Swanson file in blue. There is a much better alignment of the perforations, although there are still some differences. This is a work in progress. With the incorporation of the data from the 5 additional scans and corrections from the other effects that were discussed, we may be able to make accurate recreations of some roles that would otherwise be lost.